여러분 안녕하십니까? 방금 소개받은 김석준입니다. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased and honored to moderate this breakfast session of a Global HR Forum with the theme of a green economy and competitive clusters. I would like to begin this session by introducing our honorable speaker, Dr. William Miller, Herbert Hoover Professor of Public and Private Management Emeritus and Professor of Computer Science Emeritus and former Provost at Stanford University. He also served as President of SRI International and the Chairman Emeritus of Poland Software Corporation. Additionally, Dr. Miller has worked with foreign countries, helping them establish their technology, policies, and practices. He currently serves as Honorary Dean of the William F. Miller School of Management of Technology, established at Konkuk University this year. Please welcome Dr. Miller with a big applause.
Well, good morning. I'm happy to be back in Korea again. I come to Korea fairly often. I've been coming to Korea for more than 30 years. Unfortunately, I do not speak Korean, so I have to speak in English today. This is my fourth visit to Korea this year, and I expect to be back many, many more times. I really want to thank the organizers of this forum for what a spectacular forum this has been. I enjoyed yesterday very much, and I'm sure I'm going to enjoy the rest of today. It's been really quite exciting forum for me to attend, and I'm pleased that I was invited to come. And for President Kim, thank you very much for that generous introduction. I actually put it all on one page here. If you see on this title page, I put my entire professional life on one page, and that's pretty good for somebody who's as old as I am. In 2 weeks, I'm going to have my 84th birthday, and so I show you here that I've been half my professional life in academia, and I've been half my professional life in business. And you can see some of the things I did in academia on the left, and then on the right, you can see some of the things I've done in business. And I point out this last one, this company here, where I'm chairman and founder of a company called Lumiet, which I'm happy to say manufactures here in Korea. But I point this out because I started this company 2 years ago, just before my 82nd birthday. And I like to point out that we always talk about young entrepreneurs. You can be an old entrepreneur. You don't have to be young to be an entrepreneur. And if you miss the chance when you're young, you still have a chance when you're old. So keep that in mind. You can be an old entrepreneur. So I'm going to talk about the green economy and competitive clusters. And much of what we talk about in developing any kind of cluster, a green cluster or any other cluster, have some of the same characteristics. So here are the steps that we have to go through to develop a high-tech green type economy. To build these new high-tech clusters, the region, it has to be in some region, has to have the fundamental resources, which means the research and research-trained engineers that create the innovations. But then you need the entrepreneurs who turn these innovations into business. And these are often not the same people. Occasionally they are the same, but most often they really are not the same people because there's a different talent in creating innovations and a different talent in turning these innovations into business. And then, very importantly, you need what we call a habitat, a business, a social, and political environment that facilitates entrepreneurship and breeds entrepreneurs. This habitat, this environment in which they operate becomes very important. And I'm going to dwell on that a good part of my time this morning. Innovations occur in several ways, many different ways. Some innovations occur at a place, a local area, and some occur in networks. Networks become very important. We talk about the innovation networks because many innovations don't occur in one place anymore. They occur at a collection of different places around the world. One of the more famous ones is the case of the iPod, where items from different countries around the world, I think 9 different countries are involved in the development of the iPod. So the best of each of these came together to form this product. Innovation networks become very important. But also, place is very important because some kinds of innovation, particularly very deep, industry-changing, technology-changing innovations, usually occur in one place. Thomas Friedman said the world is flat, and in a certain way, the factors of production are more widely spread than they've ever been. So in that sense, you could say the world is flat. But at the same time, there are forces of agglomeration that give rise to this concentration in activities in clusters and in regions. The world is really not flat. It's a waffle. If you look at it more carefully, you see these peaks of excellence, steeples of excellence, if you like, that represent excellence in different areas of specialization and design, in manufacturing, research, marketing. And there is a value in these clusters coming together because they mutually reinforce each other. Comparative advantage no longer accrues to a country per se, it accrues to regions or locales, and those regions that have the highest level of knowledge intensity are going to be the ones who are most advantaged. So here's a picture of the U.S. You can see that tech world isn't flat. There are these peaks of excellence at different places in the U.S. And the networks, innovation networks, connect between these peaks of excellence. They don't connect just any place. They connect to these various steeples of excellence, if you like. Now, place is also important because as infrastructure is developed, there are ways to disperse certain activities, routine activities, but there's also an increasing complexity in the management of these activities, and so that leads to more agglomeration, localization, and the development of these clusters. Breakthrough innovations, in particular, don't occur in the networks. The breakthrough innovations occur locally when certain people are working intensely together to find deep new ideas and deep new scientific principles. Cleantech. I'm going to turn now to cleantech in Silicon Valley, and I want to explain why Silicon Valley has become the largest center of venture capital investment in cleantech in the United States. I emphasize it's the venture capital investment. There are a lot of other investments, government investments. There are also corporate investments. But in terms of the venture capital investments, it's become the largest center of clean tech investment in the United States. We have about 4% of the population of the United States, and we have 20% of the clean tech companies in the Bay Area. Clean tech investments in Silicon Valley rose by 94% from 2006 to 2007. In 2008, it sort of held flat. In 2009, we've seen a little increase in pickup, but clean tech has become a thriving area in Silicon Valley. Here's a picture. Here's the counting of the clean tech investments in the United States as a whole in 2008, and you'll see solar is by far the biggest. 40% of all the clean tech investments were in the solar area. Biofuels was second, only about a fourth as much. And then down at the very bottom, you see water. Water didn't get very much attention, and I think that's unfortunate. I think we have major water problems in the world, and I hope in the future we'll see more investments in these new water technologies. California has an index. You can go to this website that I show here, the California Green Innovation Index, and see all the activities in California in terms of development of green technologies and companies in the clean tech area. And Silicon Valley, as I mentioned, has now become the largest center of clean tech investments in the U.S. And how did it do this? How did this happen so quickly? Because it was a very rapid change. In just 2 or 3 years, we went from being very small in the area of clean tech to becoming one of the dominant areas. Silicon Valley is very much a region that keeps changing. It keeps reinventing itself. And here's a headline from the local newspaper, the San Jose Mercury News. It came out in August of 2009 saying that Silicon Valley has reinvented itself again. It's made the change, the transition. It's gone through many transitions, starting with the vacuum tube, the radio vacuum tube, more than 100 years ago, and now gone through this transition into the clean tech area. And one of the remarkable things is contained in this report, which came out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it shows the concentration of talent in these different areas in Silicon Valley. For example, the very top line, computer equipment and manufacturing, what this is telling us is that in the Bay Area, actually just in Santa Clara County, that there are 27.8 times as many workers per capita in this area as compared to the country as a whole. What this is telling us is a huge concentration of talent. And if you look into all of these different areas, you'll see on the average there are about 4.8 times as many workers in these areas per capita as for the United States as a whole. This is a talent-based region, focused very heavily on this high-tech talent. It's not a surprise that many things happen there because of all the concentration of talent. What I'm going to talk about next is based on a number of books at this project. In the upper left, you see the Stanford Program on Regions of Innovation and Entrepreneurship has produced these books. The first one, The Silicon Valley Edge, came out in year 2000. If you remember what happened in year 2000, that's when the dot-com bubble burst. And people told me this should have been called the Silicon Valley Precipice because we more or less fell off the precipice. But we called it the Silicon Valley Edge. Then in 2006, a book on making IT, the rise of Asia in high tech. This covered regions in 6 Asian countries, including Korea, Japan, China and Taiwan separately, Singapore and India. This came out in 2006. And then this report came out also in 2006 on high-tech leadership in China. A new book came out last December, 2008, called Greater China's Quest for Innovation. And this included, by Greater China, we're speaking principally of Taiwan and mainland China. And then this book, Risky Business, will be out early in 2010. This is about university-industry collaboration. It talks about the opportunities and the risk involved in university-industry collaboration in these countries, in the U.S., in Taiwan, and China. So what came out in these books I'm going to put on 2 slides. You don't have to read the books because I have it all on 2 slides, or actually all on 1 slide, so it's not necessary to read the book. These are the features that we found are very important in developing an advanced high-tech entrepreneurial habitat, the business, social, political environment that fosters innovation and breeds entrepreneurs. And the first is these regions are knowledge intensive. I don't need to dwell on that very much, but it's clear that the knowledge intensive part of the world economy is the rapid growth part of the world economy, growing more rapidly than commodities or agriculture. It's the high-tech part, or the knowledge-intensive part, which is the growth part. So to participate in the growth part of the world economy, it's necessary to be in the high-tech part. It's important to have universities and research institutes that interact effectively with industry. Now, at this point, I always point out the first mission of a university is to be a good university. If it spends all of its time interacting with industry, it may not be a good university, but it can do both. And it's important to remain as a good university, but at the same time, interact effectively with industry. And by effectively, I mean a two-way interaction. It's not a one-way interaction. The most effective ones were where the universities learn things from industry, industry learns things from the university, and there are a lot of mechanisms that one can develop to foster that kind of two-way interaction. That becomes important. You need favorable government policies, tax policies, research reinvestment policies, intellectual property policies, labor policies become important, because one of the important things in an entrepreneurial region is to have a very mobile workforce. That becomes very important. And labor policy will have much to do with whether the workforce is mobile or not mobile. I have an example. When I was president of SRI International, we had an office in Frankfurt. We had an employee who was not being very productive, and we wanted to terminate that employee. It took us 2 years to get that done. The labor policies were so favorable to the employees that it took 2 years to finally get this individual terminated. A startup company can't tolerate that. A startup company might be gone in 2 years, so they have to be able to move much more quickly. Labor policy becomes very important. A country that's done a wonderful job of changing their labor policies is Japan. Over the last 15 years, they made a number of changes that make it easier for individuals to move from big companies to small companies. Portable health plans, portable retirement plans, those become very important features for a mobile workforce. It's important to have a results-oriented meritocracy. By this, I mean that the workers are going to realize that they will be rewarded by what they can do and what they know, and not by who they know. It becomes very important to do this. It's important to have a climate that rewards risk-taking and tolerates failure. And that means both the entrepreneurs have to be in a position to take risks, but also the financial people, the investors, have to be understanding enough of the activity to be able to take a risk. We have many cases in California where individuals have started companies and failed, and started another company and failed. And again, here is where government policy is important. In some countries, if an entrepreneur fails and goes bankrupt, that entrepreneur cannot get refinancing for several years. Sometimes it's just a practice and sometimes it's illegal, but that's a great inhibition to someone wanting to start a company. If they realize if they go bankrupt, the penalty is very high if they can't get financing for another company. So having a good policy in the area of finance is also important. But we have cases of individuals who, I mentioned, have started companies and failed and then started new companies. Famous case is a man named Jerry Kaplan who started 2 companies that failed. One of them was a pen company to enter with a pen, enter data into the computer. Jerry Kaplan lost $75 million of shareholders' money. Now, these days of big dollars and big numbers, 75 million doesn't sound like very much, but that's a lot for a startup company. He lost $75 million. He then started a company called On Sale, which was a big success. So he did very well, but the interesting thing is those investors who invested in Go, the pen company, and lost the money, invested in his new company, On Sale, and more than made it back. So he was able to not only fail and start over, he could fail and start over with the same investors, which is remarkable. It's important to have a knowledgeable venture capital industry. And by knowledgeable, I mean 2 things. It's important that the venture capitalists themselves know how to work with startup companies. In many places in the United States and other countries, the venture capitalists come from the financial services area. They can help with the financing, but they don't know how to work with startup companies. They don't know how to work with the personnel. It's important for them to be able to understand that. In California, our venture capitalists mostly come from industry itself. They have been entrepreneurs themselves before. They know how to work with startup companies, and that becomes very important. The other thing, it's important for the venture capitalists to understand the risk profile of a venture capital portfolio. Most new ventures will fail. A study of Kleiner Perkins Caulfield and Byers, one of our most successful venture capital firms in the 1990s, showed that 70% of their ventures, of their investments, failed. But the other 30% were so spectacularly good that they had a very fine return. Their internal rate of return was more than 50, which is a very healthy rate of return. So understanding that risk profile and how to make those investments and the willingness to take the risk and make those investments, understanding that risk profile is essential for a vibrant venture capital industry. These clusters need to have an open business environment where they share information. They don't give away their trade secrets, but people share a lot of information. They learn from each other. There is a collective learning that goes about in the community. So the whole community, the whole region learns through this open business environment. That becomes very important in the development of a cluster. Of course, you need collaboration between business, governments, and nonprofits. Many of the nonprofits become important players in the cluster. In Silicon Valley, we have no central government. There are 21 political jurisdictions, towns and townships and the counties in Silicon Valley, 21 different political jurisdictions. But we have a number of nonprofits that play a coordinating role, and that becomes a very important role. And I have an interesting example. Because of these 21 different political jurisdictions, each one of them had different building codes. A company like Hewlett-Packard might be located in 10 or 12 of these different political jurisdictions with different building codes. We were able, through this nonprofit called Joint Venture Silicon Valley, to bring all these political jurisdictions together to develop a common building code so that Hewlett-Packard and other companies like that, when they wanted to submit their building requests, could do so in the same form for each of these political jurisdictions. So this kind of collaboration becomes really very important. The specialized business services become a supporting cluster in any of these regions. The specialized business services, like the lawyers, the accountants, consultants, these are the very specialized that know how to deal with startup companies. When Silicon Valley first started, we had to go to San Francisco to get our legal advice. Well, those lawyers are very good with banks and airlines and retailers, but they didn't know anything about startup companies. So there was a whole new industry of law firms building up who were able to deal specially with startup companies. The same was true for the accounting. The same was true for consulting firms. These kind of specialized business services permit these new startup companies to move rapidly, move very rapidly, because these services know how to deal with them specifically. Of course, you need a high quality of life. The high quality of life doesn't mean just entertainment. It means a lot of things like good schools for the children, good transportation. Those are all very important areas of quality of life. That's very important for the cluster. Global linkages become very important. I mentioned earlier that innovation doesn't always occur in one place. It may occur in a network, innovation network, as we say. Silicon Valley has been very fortunate because we have a large number of immigrant entrepreneurs. There was a study of new startup companies in Silicon Valley in the 1990s conducted by Annalise Saxenian at Berkeley. She found that 29% of all the new companies were started by either Chinese or Indian immigrants. We had other immigrants from Israel and so forth, a smaller country, but 29% started by these Chinese and Indian immigrants. But more importantly, They were the ones who built the connections back to their countries of origin. It's not an accident that we have this tremendous linkage to Taiwan, to China, to Southeast Asia, to India, because of these immigrant entrepreneurs. There's great power in having a multi-cluster region. And one of the reasons that Silicon Valley could move so quickly into cleantech is that we had both IT clusters, we had material clusters, we had biotech clusters, and much of cleantech is a combination of the features of these different clusters. The technologies come together from these different clusters to make up the cleantech technologies. So it's very important in moving into new areas to have multiple clusters. One-dimensional clusters will move more quickly and get better and better at doing certain things. But when it comes to creating whole new directions and whole new industries, multiple clusters are the right way to go. And then, of course, it takes leadership. It always comes back to leadership. It takes leadership to transform a region. And that leadership may come from different places. It may come from the universities, as it did in Silicon Valley. It also in San Diego came from the university. It may come from the government officials, as it did in Taiwan with K.T. Lee, who helped start the Hsinchu-based, science-based industrial park in Taiwan, very successful. It may come from government sector, or it may come from the private sector. Much of this happened around Austin, Texas, came from the private sector. Private sector leadership started the developments there. So leadership may come from different places. But the important thing is when change is necessary, someone has to step forward and step out of their ordinary role. If they keep performing in their ordinary role, nothing new is going to happen. So leadership in transforming this, and all the important clusters that we have studied in this project, we can identify leadership, which are the ones who made the transitions. So thank you very much.
Professor Miller, thank you for your insightful presentation. Silicon Valley was acknowledged for its continuous experimentation of creativity, which has led it to a knowledge hub of the world. Professor Miller has pointed out that Silicon Valley is now leading the cleantech industries. I believe the dynamics of knowledge creation and utilization through venture companies of Silicon Valley is fueling the agglomeration process. Considering the Korean government pursues the green growth, his presentation was very relevant and appropriate, and I hope further discussions and speculations may help us to find more effective policy strategies and tools. Now, I would like to invite the panelists for further discussion. Professor Isun Shin, teaching at Yonsei University, served as Dean of the University. As well, he currently serves as member of Presidential Council for Future and Vision and President of Association of Korean Economic Studies. Next, Dr. Jung-Hyuk Lee is a senior research fellow at Science Technology Policy Institute. He has contributed to the development of various regional R&D plans and clusters promotion policies in Korea. He has also actively engaged in consulting projects for the developing countries. Please, Professor Shin, would you start first? Please welcome Dr. Shin with a warm applause.
네, 오늘 이른 아침에 또 이렇게 그 많은 오디언스 앞에서 매니지먼트 오브 테크놀로지 경영기술 부문의 창시자이시고 또 실리콘밸리의 산증인이라고 우리가 할 수 있는 윌리엄 밀러 교수님 강의를 듣고 또 토론할 수 있는 기회를 가지게 돼서 무한한 영광으로 생각합니다. 방금 들으셨겠지만은 우리 첨단 기술 기반 클러스터가 개발되기 위해서는 결국은 그 지역적인 문제가 이제 중요하다라고 말씀하셨습니다. 그러니까 가장 중요한 것은 그 산학 연계가 이제 가능해야 되고 또 뭐 그러한 것이 어떤 성과로 나타나기 위해서는 그 entrepreneurial 그런 그 기업가가 있어야 되고 또 더 중요한 것은 그런 기업가들이 활동할 수 있도록 하는 그런 어떤 해비타트, 그 환경이 중요하다고 말씀하셨습니다. 사실 그 밀러 교수님은 이 로케이션의 문제, 그러니까 이런 그 혁신 기술 클러스터가 개발되기 위한 그런 지역의 중요성을 그동안 쭉 강조하셨습니다만 오늘 강연의 초점은 오히려 그거보다는 그 해비타트, 그러한 그 실리콘밸리와 같은 그러한 그 세계적인 성공 사례를 가지고 온 그런 환경, 배경에 대해서 자세하게 지금 설명을 해 주셨습니다. 물론 이제 우리가 그 인터넷 에이지에 살고 있다고는 하지만은 그러나 뭐 세계에서 동시에 뭐 시간에 관계없이 공간에 관계없이 서로가 뭐 화상 통화도 할 수 있고 또 뭐 서로 업무도 볼 수 있는 시대에 살고 있습니다만은 그러나 아직까지 이 공간의 중요성 이것은 우리가 간과해서는 안 된다고 하는 그러한 그 윌리엄 교수님의 말씀에 우선 동의를 합니다. 동의를 하면서도 또 더 중요한 것은 결국은 창의적인 인재가 있느냐 하는 것인데 그 창의적 인재가 활동할 수 있도록 필요한 그런 여건 그것이 아마 오늘 강의의 초점이 될 것이라고 생각합니다. 우리나라의 그 벤처 캐피탈 1세대라고 할 수 있는 안철수 교수님이 그동안도 강의를 쭉 하셨습니다만은 최근에 이제 강연에서 왜 우리나라에서는 그러한 그 창의적인 그런 인재 그리고 또 이 벤처 캐피탈리스트가 잘 성공을 못하느냐 하는 뭐 그러한 배경을 설명을 했습니다. 설명하면서 우리나라에서는 실패를 인정하지 않는다 그런 얘기를 했는데 실리콘밸리에서는 우리가 실리콘밸리를 우리가 뭐 벤처 캐피탈의 어떤 요람이라고 얘기를 하지만 실제로 100개 기업 중에서 99개가 실패하고 하나만 살아남는데 그 하나 살아남은 구글과 같은 그런 세계적인 기업이 여러 개의 그 중소 벤처 캐피탈리스트를 또 이 널처하는 육성하는 그런 역할을 하고 있다. 그게 중요한 것이. 그러니까 벤처 비즈니스에서는 실패는 오히려 당연한 것이고 그것을 용납할 수 있는 그런 어떤 사회 분위기라든지 또는 제도적인 그런 장치가 필요한데 우리는 그것이 결여되어 있다. 하는 중요한 말씀하셨는데 오늘 그 윌리엄 박사님 말씀 들으면서 이 점에서는 그 정말 맥을 같이 하는구나. 안철수 교수가 짚은 것이 바로 우리 윌리엄 교수님이 방금 말씀하신 그런 어떤 헤비타트의 결여 그것이 우리나라에는 참 문제가 되겠구나 하는 것을 생각을 했습니다. 그 다음에 이제 그 뭐 저탄소 녹색 성장에 대해서는 여러분께서 다 잘 알고 계시기 때문에 거기에 대해서는 제가 설명을 안 드리겠습니다만은 정부에서는 지난 1년 동안 뭐 다양한 정책을 개발을 해왔고 또 7월 달에는 5개년 계획도 발표를 했습니다. 그러니까 정부에서 나름대로 이제 로드맵을 가지고 정부가 할 일은 하고 있다고 생각이 드는데 결국은 이 녹색 성장의 성공은 기업에 달려 있습니다. 녹색 기술, 녹색 산업, 또 녹색 인프라 구축, 또 녹색 상품의 수출 이런 것이 이제 중요한데 결국은 이러한 정책이 있다고 하더라도 기업에서 결국은 투자를 하지 않으면은 아무 효과가 없죠. 근데 이게 녹색 기술, 녹색 산업이라 하는 것이 이것이 그 리스크가 큰 그런 산업, 뭐 많은 경우에 이게 벤처 비즈니스하고 연관된 그런 부분이기 때문에 서로가 눈치만 보면서 쉽게 뛰어들지 않습니다. 이 경우에 그동안 정부에서는 정말 핵심적인 그런 분야가 되겠죠. 어떻게 하면 우리나라에서 이런 녹색 기술과 녹색 산업의 육성을 위한 그런 어떤 생태, 해비타트를 만들어 주느냐 하는 것이 사실 중요한데 그 부분에 대해서는 정부에서 사실 별 아이디어가 없는 것 같다는 걸 생각을 해요. 그래서 그런 면에서 오늘 그 윌리엄 교수님의 이 강연은 우리나라에 시사하는 바가 많고 또 정부의 그 정책 입안자들도 그러한 그 마인드, 이 비즈니스하고 연결돼서 이걸 생각을 해야지 결국은 정부의 어떤 정책 위주로 생각하면 그것은 잘못하면 탁상공론에 그칠 수밖에 없다 하는 그러한 또 귀중한 교훈을 주셨다고 생각합니다. 요사이 그 세종도시에 대해서 뭐 얘기가 많습니다만은 비슷한 맥락에서 이제 혁신도시라는 게 있습니다. 정부에서 지난 정부에서 혁신도시를 선정을 해서 정부의 이제 공기업을 지방으로 이전을 하면서 그것을 계기로 해서 산학 연계 그런 어떤 클러스터를 개발을 하겠다. 그러니까 물론 뭐 혁신도시의 유형은 4가지로 되어 있습니다만은 그 유형 중에 하나가 바로 이 혁신 기술 기반의 그런 클러스터들이 모인 그런 리전을 지역을 개발한다고 하는 것이고 그런 면에서는 지금 윌리엄 교수님 말씀하신 바로 그러한 노력이 우리나라에서도 있다고 하는 것이죠. 그러니까 그 혁신도시 선정을 할 때 외국의 선진 외국의 그 사례들을 쭉 뭐 서베이를 한 모양인데 그 중에 하나가 그 노키아가 있어요. 핀란드에 그 노키아가 있는 울루라고 하는 그런 테크노폴리스가 있는데 이게 바로 이제 그 산업 클러스터 개발형 도시로 발전을 했습니다. 이게 그 거기에는 울루 대학이 있고 노키아가 있고 또 핀란드 기술연구센터가 있고 또 거기에 이제 통신, IT 등 고부가 산업들이 그 시의 정부하고 협력해서 결국은 성공적인 모델을 만들어냈습니다. 우리나라에서도 이 혁신 도시라고 하는 것이 단순히 그런 정부의 공기업을 지방으로 이전한다는 그런 측면이 아니라 이 우리나라의 그 균형 발전을 위한 그런 어떤 지방의 특성에 맞는 그런 클러스터를 개발한다는 의미에서 정책 자체는 상당히 의미가 있는 정책이다라고 생각합니다. 그러나 이제 거기에 공기업도 옮기고 뭐 정부에서 지원을 한다고 했을 때 결국은 핵심이 되는 것은 지금 윌리엄 교수님 말씀하신 그런 어떤 헤비타트 상당히 그 조건이 많습니다. 뭐 열 몇 개를 하나하나 짚어가면서 설명해 주셨는데 제가 보니까 이제 거기에 그 3가지를 처음에 이제 말씀하셨죠. 그런 클러스가 가능하기 위해서는 3가지 조건이 필요한데 하나는 리서치가 필요하고 그다음에 그런 리서치가 가능하게 하는 그런 어떤 연구소라든지 또는 뭐 대학이라든지 이런 것이 필요하고 그다음에 엔터프레뉴어십이 필요하고 그다음에 이제 그 헤비타트가 필요하다고 하셨는데 그 3가지를 뒤에서 자세하게 나열을 하신 건데 제가 그걸 하나하나 따져보니까 결국은 대부분이 그 헤비타트, 생태하고 결부되더라는 거죠. 그러니까 그러한 것을 빼고 결국은 이 그 뭐 scratch the surface, 그러니까 우리가 겉만 그냥 가지고 얘기하는 그런 정책은 결코 성공할 수 없다. 제 생각에는 오늘 윌리엄 교수님이 이 말씀하신 그런 내용을 우리나라의 그 정부 관계자들한테 다시 한번 강연을 하셔서 이 결국은 경영이다 하는 거 뭐 It's the economy stupid라고 한 그런 뭐 말도 있었습니다만 결국은 정부 정책의 그 성공이라고 하는 것은 결국은 기업이고 경영이고 그것을 위한 그러한 생태계를 만들어주는 것이 중요하다는 그런 면에서 우리가 많은 시사점을 가질 수 있는 귀중한 그런 강의였다고 생각합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Dr. Sin. Next panelist, Dr. Lee, please start your discussion. Please welcome Dr. Lee with warm applause again.
신의순 교수님께서 이 한국 상황에 대해서 잘 설명해 주셨기 때문에 제가 토론을 맡은 부분은 아마도 실리콘밸리의 이 클린 테크놀로지 컴퍼니에 관한 내용이 될 것 같습니다. 그래서 주로 제가 밀러 교수에게 질문하는 내용들이 많기 때문에 영어로 토론하게 되는 것을 좀 양해해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. I'm so honored to speak on the presentation by Professor William Miller because I know his enthusiasm and contribution to the debates and study about technology management and innovation cluster in various countries. Especially, he is heavily engaged in Korean business and policy and decision-making processes for many years. Also, the book Silicon Valley Edge he co-edited is a comprehensive book to explain the components, dynamics, and pathways of Silicon Valley. So my knowledge about Silicon Valley is also heavily dependent on the book of Silicon Valley Edge. I do agree with you that you mentioned the world is not flat, it's waffle. But Silicon Valley is not one of the normal peaks of the waffle because it is so dominating the technology leadership in the world and also new business model creation. But also I want to point out the adaptability of Silicon Valley, switching from the military defense industry, semiconductor, personal computers, and internet service companies nowadays. So at the moment, Silicon Valley is switching its major industry from other high-tech technology industries to cleantech industries. So that is why Korean government is much keen to benchmark and the mechanism or dynamics of Silicon Valley. But from my knowledge about Silicon Valley, I wonder the previous mechanism of Silicon Valley is still working for cleantech industries in Silicon Valley. I would like to point out a few issues which was explained in the book of Silicon Valley Edge. The first one is since the collapse of NASDAQ in early 2000, the stock market of the United States is not working to boost up new technology companies in Silicon Valley. It is hardly to mobilize second round, a third round of the investment from venture companies. I do understand that venture capitalists are eager to help the cleantech companies, but further investment is not mobilized. So that is the one problem. And also you mentioned that 29% of new startups in Silicon Valley are done by Chinese people, migrants from developing countries like China and India. But nowadays, after boosting of East Asian economies or Indian economies, the entrepreneurs and businessmen from developing countries are returning to their countries. So you are losing a major component or driving forces, human resources of Silicon Valley. So that is the second weak point for the boosting of cleantech companies in Silicon Valley. And thirdly, the cleantech companies are not relying on a very disruptive technology or new technology, but it is utilizing modest technologies, which was used by semiconductor device companies around 10 years ago. So in that case, the role of universities to provide new technologies are not strong for the boosting up of new cleantech companies in Silicon Valley. Also, other catching up countries like Korea can easily compete with Silicon Valley companies, so there is no barrier to enter those markets. And another important thing I would like to mention is that domestic market of United States is not sufficient for cleantech companies in Silicon Valley. So they want to export their products in East Asian market, which means they should establish sales office, manufacturing factories in other countries, which is cannot contribute to the new job creation in Silicon Valley. But at the moment, because of the lack of investment, many cleantech companies in Silicon Valley are heavily relying on the stimulus package of Obama. But your administration or your government wants to create new jobs from investing in clean technologies. So how do you compromise two issues? The government wants to have new jobs and new industry in the United States, but most job creation from the stimulus package are created in another country. So that is my last question. I believe you mentioned in your conclusion of your presentation that the collective learning and open business environment of Silicon Valley may sustain the competitiveness of cleantech companies in Silicon Valley, which is explained by the environment to consider failure as a kind of inability of businessmen, but resources for new businesses. Also, you mentioned that the capability of a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley may guide those cleantech companies to have a more competitive power in global market. But these two ingredients of Silicon Valley are like a kind of just a starting point of the Silicon Valley in 1960s. So you should put your much energy as you did in 1960s for cleantech companies. So if you give some answers or your insightful ideas about the new phase of cleantech companies in Silicon Valley, I believe it might be very helpful for Korean government to pursue our policies for cleantech investment and new industry creation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Thank you, Dr. Shin. Dr. Miller, you have two panelist questions and comments, so please respond and answer.
Well, both Professor Shen and Dr. Lee's comments, I think, are very insightful, and I will try to comment on some of those. I perhaps won't be able to cover them all, but in particular, where Dr. Lee talked about mobilizing investment, it has been more difficult recently. The venture capital, amount of venture capital has been going down, but in reality, we had too much before. There was too much money chasing too poor deals. And so many of us think that we are going to be much better off with a smaller, more focused, and more vibrant venture capital industry. Good companies are still getting investment. I have several companies in my portfolio. I have 7 different companies that I have in my investment portfolio, startup companies, and all of them all 7 of them have been getting money when they needed it. One of them had a big struggle. 1 out of 7, struggling isn't so bad. So it is happening for good companies, but I think that we will see a shift, and we are seeing a shift in the venture capital industry. Commenting about the human resources, this is an interesting problem for us because we do have, as I mentioned in my talk, a lot of immigrant entrepreneurs. Most of them are actually not returning. There are quite a few who are returning, and usually it is not the number 1 person who returns because he or she is well established in her company, but it's maybe the number 2 or number 3 person who sees an opportunity to return, particularly to China and to India. We also had a report from our National Science Board. It was this report came out about a year ago, I think, and they studied the number of what was happening with the foreign PhDs, foreign immigrants who got PhDs at U.S. universities. And they found that, and they studied the ones who got their degrees in year 2000. And they found that 90% of them were still there. The most common practice is after they come to school, they go out and work for a while and contribute to the developments in Silicon Valley, and then they will return. If they stay too long, they don't return because now they have a family that doesn't want to return, so that becomes a problem. So, but we do need to focus more on developing our own human resource. And the United States as a whole, not just Silicon Valley, has a problem here. We have the so-called retiring baby boom generation and a new generation coming into the workforce. The retiring generation, on the average, had a higher level of education than the people who are now coming into the workforce. That becomes a problem. So there are a lot of efforts to address that, and I think we will still have to rely a lot on immigrants because the United States has 20-some% of the world GDP and only 5% of the population. You can't support 20% of the GDP with 5% of the population. You have to draw on the rest of the population of the world. These returnees who are going back to India and China actually provide an opportunity for Silicon Valley because they provide this opportunity for collaboration. So there are some benefits from that as well as some losses of the human resource. There are some new technologies that are coming in, although I agree that many of the clean tech areas are merely the use of old technologies. But 2 of my companies in particular are focused on new technologies. One is in lighting efficiency, and the other is a new catalyst. And very sophisticated design techniques were developed partly at Stanford University for designing materials become central to that company's operation. So there are new technologies coming in. There are more outside the clean tech area, I'd say, than inside. For example, medical devices and pharmaceuticals, things like that, which are not exactly clean tech. In terms of markets, perhaps one of the most dynamic markets for clean tech is in Europe, because European countries are very focused on energy efficiency in a number of areas and environmental concerns. So those are very vibrant markets. And one of my companies in particular is selling mostly into Europe, and the second one is just now beginning to enter the European market. In terms of the stimulus package, there is some dependency on the stimulus package, and a few companies get a lot of attention because they received a significant amount of stimulus money, but by and large, most of the companies in Silicon Valley are not depending on the stimulus package. They get some support from it. Usually the amount you get is very small, and the effort to get it is very large, and often not worth it for a startup company to spend the effort to get the money in the stimulus package. So still, most startup companies are depending upon venture financing as a way of financing the company.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. We have 15 more minutes, so floor is open. If anybody has a question, then please raise your hand and identify yourself and just make a short and brief question or comments. Anybody? Yeah.
감사합니다. 저 교과부의 테크노 피스코로 일하고 있는 박찬무입니다. 저는 질문을 신 교수님의 하비타트에 관한 분위기 조성, 그리고 밀러 교수께서 지금 제안하신 그린텍 클러스터가 한국에서는 왜 혁신도시나 세종시에서 불가능한지 그 가능성의 방법론에 대해서 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Anybody has another question? Or? Yeah.
한국말로 하겠습니다. 안녕하십니까. 저는 공기업의 위원을 근무하고 있는 이진원이라고 합니다. 작년 미국의 금융사태로 볼 때 모럴 해저드가 나타났는데 교수님께서 말씀하신 실패할 수 있는 어떤 그런 기회, 실패할 수 있는 어떤 기업에게 그 기회를 줘도 된다 하는 말씀하셨는데 투자자와 그리고 운영자 사이에 어려움이 존재합니다. 즉 투자자는 돈을 회수해야 되는 의무가 있고 운영자는 철저히 운영을 잘 해야 되는데 안타깝게도 이 투자를 받고 투자에 대해서 성실히 이행하지 않는 모럴 해저드를 과연 어떻게 극복해야 될 것인가 하는 부분에 보관이 있으시면 밀러 교수님께서 답변해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 이상입니다.
Thank you. Just one more question, yeah, over here.
This question is for Dr. Miller. My name is Eun-Young Kim from Austin, Texas, another tech cluster in the U.S. The green business, green economy is a buzzword around the world. So, Dr. Miller, based on your international experience, what are the competitive and competitive advantage of Korea as a green hub in the world? Thank you.
Thank you. Then Dr. Miller, will you respond?
Well, thank you very much for those questions, and I'll try to take them in turn. And the question about creating the habitat, Silicon Valley is probably not the best place to study for that because the habitat of Silicon Valley grew up organically. There was no government action to create that, neither federal government nor state government or even local government to create the habitat. It grew up organically, basically around the university, Stanford, Berkeley, San Jose State University, Santa Clara University. Stanford played a very critical role in the beginning of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is actually more than 100 years old. It started with a very important company that spun out of Stanford in 1905. It was a Federal Telegraph Company that made radio vacuum tubes and built radio stations. Half of the lifetime of Silicon Valley, in half the lifetime, the technologies that were the basis of the companies was the radio vacuum tube. So it's not the most interesting place to study if you want to think about how to create the habitat. More interesting place is San Diego. San Diego actually created a habitat that gave rise to the biotech industry in San Diego. In 20 years, they went from zero to being the third largest biotech region in the world. In 20 years, a remarkable activity. And that was actually by creative action, both of the city government and by the University of California at San Diego. So they took steps to sort of imitate the kind of things that were working in Silicon Valley. Every region will not develop the same way, but they can have the same set of goals, and the process of getting there will be different in different regions. Even in the United States, to get these features that I talked about in Mississippi, you would need different policies and different actions than we would to do that in California. On the moral hazards, there was a lot of moral hazard in the financial industries, I might say, and a bit of moral hazard in the high-tech industry, although not nearly as serious as it was in the financial industries. But in terms of the venture capitalists wanting to get a return, a venture capital company should not expect to get a return on every company it invests in. It should expect to get a good return on the whole portfolio. And that's the issue. It's a portfolio approach. And I can give you an example. I had 20 different companies that have matured. By maturing, I mean they either had an IPO, they were acquired, or failed. And out of those 20 companies, 60% were complete failures. 0, nothing. But of the other 8, there were 3 home runs, which did very well. So you can do the arithmetic. If you have 10 different companies, and of these 10 companies, 70 of them fail, give you zeros. But of the other 3, you get 20 times your investment. You now have, on the whole portfolio, about 60 divided by 10, so you have 6 times your total investment. That's a pretty good return over a 4 or 5 year period of time. So you expect some to fail. If you try to make every one a success, you'll just average them all out. You should not expect them all to be a success. On Korea as a green area, Korea is a very technology-rich country. And this is being recognized by many people, many places in the world. Many companies recognize the availability of some outstanding technologies here. I mentioned 2 of my companies manufacture here. We see one of them, the technology was derived here. The other, the manufacturing technology was developed here. So those are, Korea has this strong technology base. What I see missing is more the ability, except in the big companies, but otherwise the ability to turn these technologies into business. Silicon Valley is really not about developing technology. What Silicon Valley is expert at is taking technologies and turning it into business. And this is where the management of technology becomes very important, and one of the reasons why at Konkuk University we established a school on management technology. It will focus on that set of issues of how you take technologies and really turn them into business.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Dr. Shin, would you respond?
우리나라에서 이제 혁신 도시가 이제 앞으로 성공을 하기 위해선 뭐 어떻게 해야 되느냐 그걸 아마 질문하신 것 같은데요. 뭐 제가 이 분야의 전공이 아니라서 안철수 교수가 이제 발표한 거를 좀 말씀을 드리면은 그 중에서 이제 몇 가지 시사하는 점이 있습니다. 왜 우리나라에서는 그 벤처 비즈니스가 성공하기 힘드냐는 것. 첫 번째는 우리나라의 산업 구조가 이 대기업 중심으로 되어 있기 때문에 이 중소 기업가들이 새로운 사업을 시작하기가 상당히 힘들다. 그리고 실제로 이제 대기업하고의 관계에서 어떤 새로운 그러한 뭐 기술이라든지 그런 사업 기회를 만들어도 결국은 그 이익이 대기업으로 흘러 들어가고 이런 그 상대적으로 그 취약한 입장에 있는 중소기업은 결국은 살아남지 못하는 그러한 구조. 그래서 우리나라의 이 산업 구조를 대기업과 벤처기업이 서로 상생할 수 있는 그러한 구조로 바꾸어 나가는 것이 필요하다. 아까 뭐 잠깐 말씀드렸지만은 구글이라고 하는 세계적인 그러한 기업이 하나가 또는 마이크로소프트라고 하는 그런 세계적인 기업이 하나가 만들어지면은 그 주변에 수많은 그러한 그 벤처 비즈니스들이 거기에 이제 창업이 되고 서로 그 연관 관계를 맺어야 되는데 그 안철수 교수가 발표하신 걸 보면은 전 세계의 혁신 아이디어의 90%가 중소 벤처기업에서 나온다 이런 얘기를 했습니다. 그리고 물론 우리나라 삼성전자가 이제 뭐 세계 그 분야에서 뭐 1위를 드디어 이제 탈환했다 뭐 그런 얘기를 하고 있습니다만은 삼성전자가 자리 잡고 있는 수원 지역에 과연 거기에 실리콘밸리와 같은 그런 어떤 그 클러스터들이 조성이 되어 있느냐? 삼성은 삼성전자 안에서 모든 것을 다 처리를 하기 때문에 그러한 기술이라든지 그러한 어떤 노하우가 주변으로 퍼져나가는 그런 게 사실 없습니다. 그러니까 삼성전자가 세계적인 기업이 되면은 그 많은 그러한 기회를 나누어야 되는데 그러한 것이 약하다고 하는 게 상당히 좀 중요한 문제가 될 것이라고 생각합니다. 그리고 결국 이제 그런 헤비타트의 문제인데 그래서 혁신도시도 이제 결국 마찬가지죠. 수원이라고 하는 도시에 삼성전자가 들어가서 거기에 산학연관 연계를 통해서 핀란드의 그 노키아가 위치하고 있는 아까 올레라고 했나요? 울루라고 하는 그런 테크노폴리스가 형성됐듯이 우리나라도 그런 지역별로 그러한 것이 가능하도록 만드는 그 여러 가지 여건이 조성되어야 되는데 그런 면에서는 아마 정부의 역할 또 기업의 역할 또 우리 밀러 교수님 말씀하신 그런 어떤 그 비정부 기관들의 역할 이런 것이 다 연계가 돼서 나타나야 되지 않을까. 우리나라는 모든 것이 너무 정부 주도형으로 되기 때문에 혁신도시도 마찬가지고 녹색성장도 마찬가지고 이것이 국민 전체의 어떤 공감을 얻고 기업이 같이 이 레벨을 맞춰서 같이 가는 그런 것이 좀 부족하지 않나 생각을 합니다.
Thank you, Dr. Shin. Then we have just one more question. Yeah, Dr. Zhang, please. Microphone, please. Just a minute. Yeah.
그린테크를 통해서 다시 그 녹색 성장이라는 정책 하에 지금 경제 발전을 시키려고 하는데 그 가운데 특별히 그린테크를 발전시키는 가장 원동력 중에 하나는 이 저탄소 정책, low COT 그 프로젝트라고 생각하는데 지금 우리 한국 같으면은 대기업 중심으로 할 때 아직까지 그 탄산가스를 배출하는 기업들이 되게 많다고 생각합니다. 그래서 이게 좋은 시장이라고 보는데 또 특별히 중국 같은 데는 공업화가 급격하게 이루어지기 때문에 이 탄산가스 배출권을 판매하는 좋은 시장이라고 생각하는데 우리 한국에서 이런 이 그린테크를 발전을 통해 가지고 녹색 성장이 이루어지도록 하기 위해서 이 저탄소 정책에 의한 탄산가스 배출권 판매 시장 이 세계 시장이 어떻고 우리 한국은 어떻게 접근해야 되는지 그걸 좀 윌리엄 교수님께서 말씀해 주시면 좋겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Dr. Miller, please.
Yes, so thank you very much. I have to confess I don't really know a lot about the carbon trading market. I know there's a lot of attention being given to that, but it's not an area that I can really comment on. I do think that there are many other areas of energy efficiency. One of the nice things about the cleantech movement, if you want to call it that, is that every country can play. There's a role for every country in the world. Poor countries in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, can grow the feedstocks for biofuels, for example. There's a role for everybody. And I believe, although I don't consider myself a real expert on this, but I believe the greatest return will come from looking at energy efficiency in everything, buildings, manufacturing, transportation, and so forth.
Thank you Thank you very much for all your active participation. especially Dr. Miller, for your sharing your valuable insight on this important issue. Before closing, let me add my thought on this issue of green growth. When a certain state or phenomenon reaches its climax, change becomes inevitable. The global society has reached the peak of industrial modernization and the black shadow of its development, which has taken the form of global climate catastrophe, is calling for fundamental changes in the way we produce, consume, and live our life. When President Lee Myung-bak proclaimed the national vision of low-carbon green growth over a year ago, it is based on this acceptance of the transition into the era of ecological modernization. It means embracing the change toward a new civilization. However, ecological modernization, or what we call the green growth, will only become at great stride by the global society. In order for Korea to continue to play a pivotal role in this century, we must make efforts to lead the way in green growth by becoming an early mover toward this uncharted territory. Thank you again for the thoughtful presentation and discussions this morning, which I believe would help shape the green growth policy for the coming days. Thank you very much again. 대단히 감사합니다. 그리고 following this session, there's various issues and panels will continue on these areas. So, which many of them will be much interested from many of you. So, please, if you have time, then just participate another session of this panel. Thank you again. 대단히 감사합니다.